Howdy folks, Justin here, and it is balance patch time. That's right. In preparation for Isle of Madness, we have some pretty exciting balance changes that I want to talk about. They were just revealed today, and of course the big one is on the screen, the one that a lot of people have been clamoring for. It is a change to Tullius's conscription. I say change, it's really just a nerf. Tullius's conscription is going up to 12 cost from 11. Otherwise it still does the same thing. Still a fantastic deal for this price. But yeah. Is 12 cost to Tullius's conscription gonna matter? Well, I want to start with a story, right? Over a year ago, like a year and a half ago now, Unstoppable Rage used to cost 7 magicka, got changed to 8. And before it got changed, it was everywhere. After it got changed, it was not. And it only got increased by one cost. Is this the same? It's not the same, no, but it is an example of where a single cost increase dramatically decreased the amount of play a card saw, even if it didn't necessarily dramatically change the power level. It did change the power level a little bit, and the perception was enough to make people change their strategy a lot of the time. And I think that in this case, while it is definitely a power level nerf, it is definitely a decrease in the power level of the card. It is an extra turn. Even if you ramp towards it, it's still an extra turn for your opponent to do something before you hit that first conscription. I think it is going to change some things. I think you're going to see less conscription. Not even necessarily because the deck is no longer positioned in the same place power level wise as decks that ran conscription were before, but because of that perception. And that extra turn is relevant. It's going to cause some games that you would have won but lost because it costs 11 to go the other way. Do I like the change? Well, I don't really like this card, to be honest with you. I like playing with it. I think playing conscription decks is actually quite a bit of fun, but because I like the way that they play, you know, kind of very hungrily for the board because they know they can refuel with conscription. But I'm not a huge fan of a neutral card being this powerful in general. But it's a welcome change. I will say that. It's a welcome change, and one that I'm excited to see and excited to play with and excited to feel the impact of on the meta. So let's go to the next image. This is Temple Patriarch. Some of these cards, by the way, have been buffed, and this is the Big Daddy Exalt card. It used to be 7 magicka for a 5/5, trigger the Exalt of each friendly creature. Now it's the exact same card, but with 1 magicka less on its cost. So Tullius's conscription costs 1 more. It adds 1 turn to that phenomenon, to the conscription experience. How does 1 less magicka affect Temple Patriarch? I think it's actually pretty good. It's one of several changes to Exalt creatures in this patch. Let me go ahead and pull out another one here. The Exalt mechanic just never really saw much play. And do I think this is going to change things? Well, for Temple Patriarch, I think people are going to want to play it. I know I'm going to want to play it. I tried playing the Temple Patriarch deck a long time ago. It was really clunky and it didn't work. If Temple Patriarch cost 1 less, though, would it be better? Yes. Would it be good enough? That's hard to say. In conjunction with a couple other changes to some Exalt cards, I think it's worth pursuing. I think it's a fun idea to play this mid-range board, you know, battling Tribunal Temple deck. And certainly Temple Patriarch's change makes it better. Is it competitive now? Like, probably not. I'll be totally honest. Probably not even close to competitive. But is it viable for the latter? Almost certainly. I mean, there are some talented players who play Exalt-based decks, or at least one guy I know, I saw him talk about it on Reddit, who play Exalt-based decks at, you know, top 50 legend rank, right? These are just straight upgrades to that strategy. Now, Temple Conjurer is actually a little more interesting than Temple Patriarch is, because Temple Conjurer at this stat line actually might be constructed playable in decks that have nothing to do with Exalt in general. Temple Conjurer has always been a card that's interesting. You know, it's not unfairly costed at its old cost, Exalt 4 to summon an Atronach. It's just not good. It's playable in Arena. I like to draft it. But at Exalt 3, pretty solid. I mean, blue lacks competitive 5-drops. If you take a look at what blue can do at 5 magicka, as far as creature combat goes, there's nothing really. I mean, nothing that really exciting. You branch out into other colors for that. So giving blue an option in blue is pretty interesting. You know, I think this card bears looking at in mage decks that can run Divine Fervor for additional value, for decks that can run, again in mage that can run 5th Legion Trainer for additional value. I think Temple Conjurer at its new exalt cost is constructed playable. And where it fits is going to be kind of, you know, something that we're going to have to suss out. I'm definitely interested in trying it in mage first. But I mean, I think you can make an argument for, you know, more, you know, off-meta stuff like altar decks that are definitely interested in playing a Temple Conjurer onto the board and sacrificing away the Dunmer itself. And it also would come out on 5 and your altar would come out on 6, so you sacrifice a 2/2, you pull out your Ungolem from your deck and you go from there. I think it's definitely something worth looking at. It is now, I think, pretty competitively costed, I'll put it like that. So let's get Temple Patriarch off here. There is one more Exalt card that get buffed as well, but we're going to take a look now at Goblin Skulk. Goblin Skulk is a card that has been one of the most powerful things you can do on turn 1 or 2 since forever. And it's not just a straight nerf. This is a balanced change, right? Because while the cost did increase to 3, it also now has 3 toughness, and this makes this a much more interesting card. The reason, even though 0-cost cards aren't necessarily super powerful, although Cruel Firebloom is, and it's a card that I personally thought should have been nerfed to 1 cost, Goblin Skulk is incredibly powerful because it is very specific tutoring, and it pulls exactly what you want when you want it, and ideally as soon as possible. Making this cost 3 instead of 2 is going to slow down your ability to tutor up that specific thing. So it's going to be a lot worse. And like, let's say you're using Goblin Skulk for one of the most innocent things you can do with it, which is pull out 0/1 goblins in a goblin deck. It's much worse at that. Much worse. And now sitting at the 3-drop spot, it's going to compete with Murkwater Savage, which is the card you want to play on 3 every time. Preferably after a turn 2 Skulk, where you got a 0-cost goblin, so you can buff up your Goblin Savage. I mean, that got a lot worse. Skulk in general is probably less powerful now, but it is definitely very interesting still, and I think still sees play in some decks, and might even still see play in Telvanni decks looking to grab Cruel Fireblooms, because that extra 3 toughness is super relevant. It means that it trades much more effectively than it used to, and it also means that it doesn't die to Firebolt, or Blackhand Messenger, right? Or Ash Servant, if anybody ever played Ash Servant. Beautiful premium alternate art, by the way, on Ash Servant. One of my big regrets is never being able to effectively use that card. But yeah, the change to Goblin Skulk is massive. This is definitely, I think, the biggest impact change. And it's going to have impacts on Halalu decks. It's going to have impacts on Assassin decks, on Monk decks. And least of all, although it will have an impact on them, on Telvanni decks, which are using it to grab Cruel Fireblooms. This is a change that I'm excited to see because I think it's going to open up some opportunities for other things to be played, and I'm a big fan of changing things up and keeping the meta fresh. And going forward, it's worth pointing out, like, it does mean with less reliably tutored, like, super early game 0-drop cards, it does, you know, mean that there's probably some kind of flexibility and design space for 0-cost cards to be at a slightly higher power level in the future than they currently are. So yeah, Goblin Skulk. Very interesting change. Much worse now. But not always worse. Genius Pathmage got changed. This is this is Nixox's fault. There's always something in a patch that has to do with Nixox. Whether it was Genius Pathmage in this one, or Ulfric's Uprising in the last patch, or Nixox itself a couple patches ago. Genius Pathmage gets the nerf stick now. And this makes a lot of sense. Genius Pathmage is a really fun card. But again, kind of like Goblin Skulk, it is just super reliably powerful tutoring effect. Tutoring meaning like pulling exactly what you want out of your deck at any given time. Now, I do understand that like Genius Pathmage at 7 does kind of actually do some interesting things to Nixox math as far as Nixox Telvanni goes. Nixox, you know, costs 7, Genius Pathmage costs 7. Genius Pathmage on 7 now either pulls a Pathmage or a Nixox, right? If you're at 14 Magicka, which that deck has no problem doing. So whether or not it's a straight nerf to that deck's hard to say. I do know how to play the Nixox deck. I don't ever record with it because I just don't find it particularly interesting to watch. But I do think that this is a nerf, right? It makes it worse for the things that aren't degenerate that you can do with this card, which is kind of unfortunate. That like it's getting caught in the crosshairs, right? You know, being able to pull, for instance, Jarl Balgruuf for Unite the Houses memes is considerably more challenging now. But I still think that it's the kind of card that's dangerous, and the kind of card that you want to be at a lower power level to increase the sort of like just general card game, like expected card game variance that's going to happen in games. When you have too many effects like Goblin Skulk, Genius Pathmage, Indurul Mastermind, and Merchant's Camel in particular are the four like big offenders of this principle in my mind. The game becomes sort of samey, and you remove sort of the are they going to draw it, are they going to hit the combo piece that they need kind of, you know, mystery that creates tension in games. So, you know, I say that as like the Shadow Marking just got printed, which is one of the best draw cards ever printed. But I am glad to see Genius Pathmage get a power level change. What this does to the Nixox decks itself is something I'm going to have to figure out alone later with a calculator, but I am sad that there are things getting hit the crossfire with this, kind of like how I feel about Goblin Skulk, although Goblin Skulk I think has just been part of the meta for so long that I'm less concerned about it going away just because I'm ready for something different. Genius Pathmage is a card that never really got to see play as a fair card, although it has. It's really just a combo piece, and so I guess getting it nerfed on that, on the strength of that, okay. Now we have the last Exalt card buffed, and this is Enamoured's Keeper. Enamoured's Keeper is a card I crafted a playset of when Houses of Morrowind dropped, because in the world before Houses of Morrowind, it wouldn't have been so bad. Paying 8 magicka for a 8/3, okay. 3 magicka for a 4/3, okay. Like, these are fine. The game has gotten more powerful, and there just has never been a place for Enamoured's Keeper. I've tried, and better players have tried too. It's just not a thing that has worked. But now Enamoured's Keeper reads Exalt 4, so now for 7 magicka, you lay down a 9/3. You get an Heirloom Greatsword on it. 7 magicka for 9/3. That's a pretty good rate. Heirloom Greatsword is a really powerful card. I've recommended putting a random Heirloom Greatsword in a lot of decks before. And I think it's the sort of thing you can find a lot of success with, especially in decks with a lot of small creatures, a lot of charge creatures or token generators or anything like that. Heirloom Greatsword's an interesting card. Is this card playable now in Constructed? Well, it's definitely better. It was unplayable before, despite like having like looking very powerful. It's a card I'm going to try out. I'm not going to lie. I am going to try out Enamoured's Keeper in some decks. Do I think it's good enough? Maybe. It definitely might be. A lot of aggro decks got nerfed. I mean, like, this next one is going to hit them pretty hard. A lot of aggro strategies got some nerfs here. And Enamoured's Keeper is a card that's good in decks that are aggressive, but worse than the aggro decks that run red. So maybe Enamoured's Keeper is something you can play now because its relative power level has changed dramatically. Or maybe it hasn't changed quite that much. Either way, what I like about this is it makes me want to play Heirloom Greatsword equipped Enamoured Keeper, which I really didn't feel like doing after like the first 2 times I tried it 9 months ago or whatever the fuck it was now. So, yeah, Enamoured's Keeper got a buff. I'm excited about it. It's going to keep me interested for a little while. Is it good enough to craft? I would say no. Don't craft Enamoured's Keeper anytime soon. But if you already have him, give him a shot because it might be that at the very least, the unstable meta that's going to erupt immediately following the patch for a while, as people get their footing and try new things, see what works and what doesn't anymore, is a place where an Enamoured's Keeper might do well, because even if it's not great, it might be good enough in that situation, and then you get a feel on how you can maximize your play with it, and that could be a good time. So, Enamoured's Keeper, one I'm going to be keeping in mind in the immediate future. Finally, we have Ash Berserker. Ash Berserker is one of the most powerful cards in the game. Ash Berserker is one of the most powerful cards in Houses of Morrowind by a significant margin, and I said as much like the week the expansion came out. And I've been right since, and it's obvious. It's not like I'm a genius for figuring that out. It draws cards. Drawing cards is the most powerful thing you can do in this game besides like just winning. and drawing cards helps you win. Now, Ash Berserker, one of the reasons Ash Berserker was kind of great is that, like, even if it wasn't drawing you any cards that turn, it might draw you any cards next turn. If it didn't draw any cards next turn, it's still a 4-3 body, and you're an aggressive deck, so beat down with your 4-3 for 4, which is a fine stat rate. It's not as good now. In fact, this nerf is pretty significant, I think. A lot of times, the way you get Ash Berserker to trigger is you put it in the same lane as an Orc Clan Captain, or that you put it in play when you have a 5th Legion Trainer in play, or you put it into play when you have a Divine Fervor in play. None of those work anymore. You can't use Crown Quartermaster to slap a small little dagger on there to turn that dagger into any other card in your deck, which is better than the dagger. So this is pretty significant. I think this has a reasonably large impact on a couple different decks. Halalu, although Halalu already draws a bunch of cards. Rage decks that were branching into running Ash Berserker are probably made a little less effective by this, but not dramatically so. Mid-Battle Mage gets affected by this a little bit, although not dramatically so, although more so there than some other decks. Crusader, though, I think gets hit pretty hard. Reteran, I think, gets hit pretty hard. And so those decks just get a little bit worse. Is Ash Berserker still playable? Not in all those decks, I don't think, actually. I think that there are some decks for which there are no better options for card draw, and it'll continue to see play there. But in some places, I think you're going to just take Ash Berserker out, and you're going to be okay with it. And maybe it's okay to live in a world where aggro decks don't draw as many cards as they currently do. That's it. Those are our balance changes. I hope you guys are as excited as I am to see what kind of wacky stuff people are playing as soon as the patch hits, because that's, like, the only time better than right after the release of new content is to right after the release of a balance patch, because that's when people have the opportunity to experiment a little bit more and get away with it. And I love seeing people experimenting. So I'm looking forward to playing with all these cards in different iterations, and I hope that you are pretty excited about it too. I'd love to see in the comments what you guys think about these changes and what you like and dislike about them, or what you would have changed instead. I will see you guys on the ladder.